Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'd like to first start off by thanking you for inviting us to conduct a penetration test against your company. We hope our results and insight can help increase your security posture. I'm Sergio.
I'm Powell.
I'm Powell.
I'm Sarika.
I'm Ayman.
Steven.
I'm Jack. To begin, we're going to be talking to you about what we're going to be talking about today. To begin, we're going to be doing the methodology, what we did for the engagement itself, and some stuff we did for pre-engagement, as well as how the scale we used to rate the severity of our vulnerabilities that we found. Then we're going to talk about the assessment overview, so the vulnerabilities themselves, and we'll be going into the impact of the vulnerabilities and what they could mean for your systems. Next, we'll be giving you some recommendations on how to remediate those vulnerabilities, as well as some options for employee trainings and policies. We'll briefly touch on some compliances that you're going to have to follow and what they mean for you as a business. And finally, if we have time, we'll answer some questions.
So our methodology included first conducting OSINT and collecting all publicly available information. We used that to create an attack plan. We also conducted enumeration of the network, and then after that, we searched for vulnerabilities within your network. After that, we categorized all of them and compiled them into the report, which we will be presenting to you. So we used CVSS ratings to categorize the vulnerabilities, and those show the impact on your network. We used various metrics such as attack complexity, attack vector, scope, user interaction to categorize the vulnerabilities, and the lower CVSS ratings indicate less impactful ones, and the more critical ones are the ones that would need to be remediated immediately.
All right, so now we're going to talk about overall what we found. So in total, we found 22 unique security vulnerabilities in the Cozy Croissant systems, both in the corporate network and the guest network. Now, these vulnerabilities spanned across the entire CVSS score. So we had low vulnerabilities and critical vulnerabilities. Notably, over a quarter of the vulnerabilities we found are critical. These vulnerabilities are ones that need to be remediated immediately because these will have severe impacts to the company if a malicious actor uses them against you guys. Now that being said, we will applaud you guys for your initial response to our first penetration test results. A lot of the vulnerabilities that we had originally found have been remediated and are thus not accessible to attackers.
Yeah, in terms of key findings, the first thing we want to touch on is default and or weak credentials. So during our enumeration and social engineering phase, we found 2 credentials which ended up being domain admins, allowing us to get complete control of the network. So during our second phase, we were happy to find that these credentials are changed for Active Directory, but not for other services, including like the Bluefin, for example. And then another weak credential we had was the payment system for the SQL database. So another thing we're going to touch on is external access. We were happy to see you guys did network segmentation. In order to get access to the corporate network beforehand, we could just ping it from before. But now we would have to pivot from the guest kiosk in order to get into the corporate network. Another thing we want to touch on is DOS attacks. The application Bluefin, for example, had 2 DOS attacks that we were aware of. And we also want to touch on social engineering. We found that we were able to social engineer one of your employees to get credentials and also find out the details of one of your customers.
Okay, first we'll touch on network segmentation. We found that network segmentation was actually very well constructed for the most part, except for the fact that we could, as Powell said earlier, pivot from the guest kiosk to the corporate network. How we were able to do this was breaking out of the guest kiosk, and I think that's like the first recommendation we have for you. One of your employees mentioned that you have $50,000 to allocate to new and upcoming advances in your cybersecurity department. So we recommend that you buy standalone kiosks from reputable vendors. Specifically, we found in our research that Oracle had very good kiosks And although they were a little bit pricey, it seems that it's within your budget for the most part, as we saw 4 kiosks on your network. In addition to that, the password policies. There were improvements to the passwords policy, but we noticed that in some legacy systems, such as your payment web server, we found that there were old credentials on there for users we found in the previous penetration test. And we were able to leverage that to find some critical vulnerabilities and access user data that was private, and in some cases we found credit card information. And finally, we suggest that you modernize many of your services. We provided specific remediations in the report for specific vulnerabilities, but in general, some of the applications were using outdated libraries or software that we also recommend that gets updated within the future releases. And we'll go through that in the report, and we've detailed that in extensive detail. And with that, I guess we'll move on to the legal policies regarding our remediations.
So as part of our penetration test, we also want to provide you guys with the knowledge you need to secure your website securely and in compliance with the law. So a big thing that specifically, as your company is stationed in Nevada, a law that you need to follow is Nevada Chapter 603A. This law details what is described as a data collector, and as you guys collect credit cards from your customers, personal information such as name, home address, you qualify as one. And there are certain restrictions that you need to have on your database, encryption methods, how you deal with payment cards, to not face regulatory fines. If you ever have a data breach and any of this information were to be released, you'll be liable to consumers suing you and the government doing fines for negligence. So we recommend that your legal team and your IT team work together to make sure you're in compliance with Nevada Chapter 603A. And part of Chapter 603 also states that you have to be in compliance with the payment card industry data security standard, which is how you guys need to handle credit card information specifically. Some examples are storing credit card information, strong security standards such as using encrypted communication, and encrypting your credit cards. Currently, all your credit card and user information is not encrypted in your databases. So if you have any data leak, all of that information is publicly available. And you need to have some source of monitoring, and either yearly or annually, yearly or monthly tests of your security, right? Low password policies and things like out-of-date services will make you susceptible to fines from the government. So with all that said, we have time for questions, I believe. Does anyone have a question?
Sure, so thank you all very much. Do you believe if we were to move to the cloud, it would solve our problem?
If you move your current applications how they are to the cloud, your applications are still vulnerable due to out-of-date services and password policies. All of this would still have to be updated. It just changes where the server location is.
Thank you.
I think one thing that can help if you were to move to the cloud is to maybe use a VPN to be able to connect to the corporate network, for example. If you have like a company VPN that is required by all employees to use to access all your internal services, that's an extra layer of security that will need to be compromised in order for a threat actor to be able to then access the Cozy Croissant systems. So that's one thing that can help stop that. But of course, as Stephen said, the modernization of your guys' systems is probably the more important thing to worry about now.
Thank you.
I have one question. Do you see something that we can implement quickly, like a quick win that we have starting next Monday, we have improvements in our security?
I'd say the network segmentation you guys initially had was good. However, part of the guest network is still access internal corporate networks. So I think if you guys were to buff up that network segmentation and add more rules and be able to block off the corporate network entirely from the guest network, that would immensely increase the security. Because if attackers are not able to access the guest network, the corporate network, it makes it a lot harder for them to be able to do things bad to your company.
Additionally, I think a really easy fix would be, we mentioned multiple times of the passwords. There were some weak passwords that
Hey, your time's up.